everybody. My name is Obed Figueroa, representing Diversity PreMedical. This is a series called Lessons Learned, and I'm so excited again today to have another guest. So let me read his bio so you can get to learn more about him. Mr. Julio Sierra is currently the Associate Director of Admissions for American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine, also known as AUC. He's been actively engaged in higher education admissions for the past 15 years. He earned a bachelor's in communication from the University of Miami and is currently enrolled in an MBA program at the Keller School of Management. He has a strong passion for helping students achieve their goal of becoming physicians. He was raised in Brooklyn, New York, by parents of Puerto Rican descent. They taught him the value of helping people and providing educational opportunities. One of his passions is working with applicants who may have been left out of the medical school landscape. Furthermore, he proudly sees himself as an underdog, an uncanny parallel to the prospective students he works with on a daily basis. Mr. Sierra is a proud husband, son, and father of 3 amazing boys. So welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me, Obed. I appreciate it. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
I can hear you perfectly fine, absolutely.
So is it okay to call you Julio?
Please call me Julio.
Okay, great. All right, so let me explain my intention. So with this platform, what we have been doing is interviewing practicing physicians. And so what I wanted to do is to explain why I thought you bring such value to this conversation. You're actively and have been actively for the past 15 years working in medical education on the administrative side, but your role is quite significant because you are seeking the students, you are screening the students, you have people that you're working with that is doing the same across the states, for the applicants looking to get into medical school. So your conversation is extremely valuable and your perspective. But also, in addition to that, we want to know about you. We want to learn about you, who you are, and what drives you. Okay. So before I dive into that, though, what we typically do is a round of speed questions, outside of the norm questions of medical education. So if you could just give me your first thought.
Sounds exciting.
Give me your first thoughts as we shoot through it. Okay, so PC or Mac?
PC.
Android or iPhone?
Android.
Really? Favorite season?
Fall.
Okay. Favorite restaurant?
Mew. It's a sushi spot right in Midtown Manhattan, right near the Empire State Building.
Okay, gotta check that out.
In the Korean barbecue district, actually.
All right. So is there a favorite, so I have to make sure I cover this, food, a dessert or snack that after you eat it, you feel guilty?
Oh, see, that's a trick question for me because I don't have much of a sweet tooth. So I'm the type that I can go to a restaurant with my wife and order a beautiful dessert and I have 2 pieces of it and that satisfies me. I don't have much of a sweet tooth. I'm more
nice.
I love sushi, for example. That's something that's a delight, like a treat for me. I feel like I might have been Asian in a previous life.
Okay. All right.
I have an affinity for the Japanese culture and I love sushi.
Yes, it's a beautiful culture, as well as our own,
Indeed.
So, favorite TV show?
Ooh. I have a few. I would say I like Breaking Bad. I could say that's one of them.
Okay. Favorite sport?
I'm gonna say basketball at this point. I might have said baseball when I was younger, but I'll go with basketball.
Music genre? Favorite music genre?
Say hip hop.
Okay. Favorite color?
Black.
Favorite drink? Alcohol if you drink.
A nice old fashioned.
That's the name of it?
Yeah, old fashioned.
Huh. Never heard of that.
It's got some bourbon or whiskey, some bitters, and a big ice cube in it.
Okay.
Very distinguished drink.
Favorite book? The last one you read, whichever.
How to make friends and influence people.
Hmm. Okay. Um, favorite car.
Not much of a car person, but I'm gonna say a Mercedes Benz.
Okay. Favorite song.
That's another tough one. Hmm.
Just gets you going.
Although hip hop is my favorite genre, uh, I like many different genres as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with El Cantante by Hector Lavoe.
Nice, nice. So now, in terms of schooling, your favorite high school teacher and subject?
Gentleman by the name of Mr. Owen Abergas,
Hmm.
and he was a math teacher. And I wouldn't say that was my favorite subject, but it was more of the way he connected with the students that made me enjoy his class. So I
Okay.
guess you could say he opened my eyes to math a little better, but it was his effectiveness and the way he communicated with the students that I remember most.
Yeah, you remember how they made you feel. That's quite often what people say.
Exactly.
Not what they said, but how they made you feel. What about for college, for undergrad? Did you have a favorite subject and teacher?
I uh I enjoyed anthropology. A
Hmm.
couple of courses in it, and I found it very fascinating. As far as my favorite professor, I would say that was a journalism professor. I was a Cuban American, and he had a lot of incredible stories and anecdotes about his family's journey through the Cuban Revolution, and I found that to be very fascinating, considering that I went to the University of Miami, and that was a very significant to that landscape, to the local landscape, if you will.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. That tells us a lot about you in part. And you're a daddy and a married man. How many years?
Yes. So I've been married to my amazing wife since 2011. We got married on 11/11/11, but we've been together much longer than that. We have three boys. Our oldest is Julian. He just turned 15 years old on October 1st. Our middle guy is Joaquin, and he'll be 13 on December the 9th. And
Mm.
our youngest just turned 5 on September 1st. His name is Giovanni Sierra, and he's the glue of the family. He's an amazing character.
Is he a jokester? My little one's like that. He was like that from little.
Oh, he is a jokester from the time he wakes up to the time he lays it down at night. Absolutely. It's very busy on that note.
Yeah. Wow. I feel, yeah, as a person in education, I feel the feeling I have is wanting to apologize to the kids that we are in this space right now, this time, and that they're impacted. I really do feel for the young people. Okay, so let's begin with you. So again, our intention really is we're our audience is pre-meds. I have over 1,300 pre-meds in my group. And I should say, I mean, since it's been since 2008, many have become physicians already and still hanging around just to be in the conversation, right? And be helpful to others. So the value I see with you is that not only do we want to understand more about you, but your work can provide tremendous insight as we're looking to empower them, get them more, better informed, things that you've learned, things in your observations. I'm sure we can do a deep dive with you, and I'm really excited. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My
Um,
pleasure.
if I may begin with you, what inspired you to go into medical education? Like, why?
So when I was at the University of Miami as an undergrad, I had started uh, in student services and support. I had a job through the school where I would work at the School of Law and just help different students out with different resources, whether it's in the computer lab or microfiche at the time, you name it. Whatever resources were at the lab, it was something that I gravitated to quickly because I enjoyed helping people. I enjoyed connecting them with different resources and just assisting in any way that I could. So me being, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City, an only child to a single parent household, I always, as I said in the bio that you read, I always saw myself as an underdog. So for me to be able to take that passion for student service and support and flip it over to a segment of the population that's underserved and minorities included in that, with that being a backbone of what we look for and who we're trying to give the opportunity in front of, basically, that was priceless to me. So being able to translate that into medical education, and just to be a little small part of their journey, and to know that one day these students that I'm interviewing, these students that I'm working with in the admissions process will one day have an impact on the lives of hundreds of patients. For me, that's all the reward I need to sleep amazing at night. So I look at it as an honor and a privilege to be able to be a small cog in their wheel and get them to where they need to be.
Awesome. So let's dive into your observations. Would you say, I mean, looking at the applicant pool, what are you seeing in the trends? Is there, what is the current state of applications for foreign medical schools? Applicants, tell me.
Well, we're actually, over the last, I would say, you know, over the past year now with the pandemic, our institution has done a really good job of transitioning our education to an online virtual platform. So, you know, one thing when the economy is struggling, there's certain areas, certain industries like education, medicine that continue to thrive. And we're also a Title, we happen to be a Title IV funded institution. So actually the U.S. Department of Education made the recommendation to any Title IV funded school to actually waive the MCAT for the next upcoming semesters, being that thousands of students in the U.S. medical school landscape were not unable to take the exam to get into medical school. So we're at a very fragile state in the entire landscape, because the demand for physicians is at an all-time high right now. And you add the pandemic into the mix, they saw the value in waiving the MCAT. So that has kind of facilitated the influx of applications for us as well. So I would say on that note, we're doing better than expected, I would say.
And so waiving the MCAT, what kind of impact did that have on the screening process? How did you alter?
So we've always taken a holistic view at the applicants. We require that they have every other requirement met, but if they have not taken the MCAT, we're fully reviewing them and giving them full consideration for direct acceptance to the medical school program. So, I mean, we still look at the strength of the program, the undergraduate institution that they've attended. We look at the trend of their grades very closely. Their letters of recommendation come into play, their CV and resume as well. So all the other requirements have to be met, but I would say there could be a little bit more scrutiny on those, considering that we're waiving the MCAT, if that makes sense.
If you could help me understand, in your interactions with the applicants, what are you observing? Are you observing, like, there's so many variables that we could talk about in that space, but I guess as a person who's doing your screening, and then another committee screens, I'm sure, what are you catching? What are you seeing where you would give advice to these pre-meds, try to make improvements here, or try to, do more here? Like, tell me what you're seeing and what you think.
Well, one of the things that sticks out most is lots of times I have students, inquire and say, "Hey, Julio, I'm thinking of this research opportunity. What does the admissions committee prefer? Do they look at research in a better light than they do shadowing, or they look at volunteering in the ER better than they do shadowing?" And I think that's an important point to make, because at the admissions committee at my program, for example, they don't favor any experience over the other. The best advice I can offer the students is to do what they're passionate about. If it happens to be shadowing a physician in OBGYN, so be it. If it happens to be volunteering in the ER or doing some research in the lab, our committee doesn't favor any experience over the other. They just want to see a strong passion to pursue medicine. So opportunities can be a little bit harder to come by, especially in the pandemic and what's going on with, everything right now. But you have to really just immerse yourself in the field in any way, shape, or form. That's what they want to see, a passion to pursue medicine, and they don't value any experience over the other, if that makes sense.
What about so you're also, are you pre-screening, doing interviews through video? Are you involved in that? You are.
In a similar fashion, absolutely. So I help support any of the applications that come in from the Northeast territory. So I interview students from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, everything in the Northeast, along with Puerto Rico. And we do it in the same fashion as we're doing this interview now via a platform called VidCruiter, which is similar to Zoom.
Interesting. So, wow, this is really good. We're so happy to have you here. What's your observation? Are you finding, I guess I'm looking for, you can definitely share what you're impressed with, but I'm curious critically, are you finding people are presenting well? Would you suggest any improvements on video presentation or pitch or speech? Are they communicating well enough? What are you seeing?
I'm seeing a special type of energy over the last few months here, and I'm going to say that a lot of it is a result of the pandemic. Because, I mean, let's face it, in order to that's a lifelong commitment. It's a journey, it's a career that doesn't end. You're
Hmm.
always learning, you're always going for new board certifications. So you have to have an incredible passion to even embark on that type of journey. And I feel like now, in what's going on with the pandemic, your resolution towards that has to be so much firmer. So
Mm,
what I'm seeing is students that are conveying that they want to immerse themselves into what's going on right now and contribute. So I think it's a special energy what I'm seeing right now.
oh, that's good to hear. That's good to, you know, that you're seeing the empathy. You know, you're seeing insight. Um, Being a foreign school, being a Caribbean school, and I know you mentioned they don't see something, they don't give more weight to one or the other. But I'm curious, is there a need for a student to be able to speak beyond a singular scope? Meaning, if a person is just from the Bronx and all they know is the Bronx, is that seen as a limited presentation?
I would say no.
Okay.
You know, we have an interesting mix of heterogeneous student body at AUC. Our average age student is about 26 years old. So we have those students that come straight out of the undergrad, the traditional ones that are accustomed to taking the summer off and going right through in September and starting consecutively right from their undergrad. But we have a fair share of non-traditional students that add incredible value to the student body, students who are in their 30s, 40s, and even 50s. I worked with a student last semester, Obed, who is as old as my mother, 70 years old. He's a second semester student at
What?
AUC. And
Wow.
when I have the privilege of interviewing a student who's 70 years old and they have the passion to move forward at that point in their lives, I mean, the type of fuel and motivation that offers me is, it just keeps me going.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing in terms anyone who's in education can appreciate that the continued need to want to learn. My question to you, and I'm sure people would say, oh, but oh my God, you had to ask him this. I would imagine. Residency placement. Now, what is the likelihood of someone that old getting a residency placement? And God, I hope they are successful, of course.
It will be much more challenging for him,
Okay,
undoubtedly.
thank
I'd
you.
be lying if I say it was not, it wouldn't be.
Hmm.
Um, on that note, I have seen students at our program in their 40s and 50s be able to obtain residency.
Yeah.
So you have to work a little harder in the third and fourth year of your rotations. At the end of the day, that's one big audition.
Hmm.
You're, you're, you're showcasing on a daily basis right in front of these program directors, these residency program directors that are ultimately in a position to pick who they want in their residency program. So as a third and fourth year student, when you go on these different rotations and the different specialties, you have to show what you bring to the table on a daily basis, from your punctuality to your professionalism
Hmm.
to the way you collaborate with your colleagues, the way that you articulate yourself. You have to be willing to be the last one to leave and the first one to get there. Now, someone who is non-traditional in their 50s or even 60s, they have to do that a little bit better, if you will. You
Hmm.
have to stand out. Um, that way, when you're going into your residency match process, you can circle back around to these program directors and say, "Hey, I'd like to request a letter of recommendation from you." At that point, they're gonna love to give you a letter of recommendation. And you know, when you go to apply for your residency and get onto licensure, you're going to apply to maybe 30 to 40 programs, or maybe even more than that. But you're going to have to hone in on the sites that you were actually in conducting your rotations, because that's going to increase your odds of landing a residency. They already saw you. They know what you bring to the table. So someone who's older in their 50s and 60s, they have to do everything just a little bit better, if you will. But the opportunity will still be there, but it will definitely be a little bit more challenging for them as well.
Gotcha. I'm seeing some parallels with that, right? So I just contributed to a book, 100 stories in healthcare, and they said just to share what your experience has been, and so I shared that making it aligned with a publication I did talking about increasing minority representation. Why do I bring this up? Because what I acknowledged in my paper, as well as in this submission, is that for Caribbean medical schools, there is a larger minority representation. It could, for multiple reasons. And I wanted for you to share with me what's your thoughts on why that is. Also in historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs that are medical schools, they have a significant higher percentage than U.S. schools. My last publication, I think it was at like 60% of color in HBCUs in medical schools. When you look in contrast to U.S. schools, it's single-digit representation. When you look at the stats for Caribbean, it's higher representation. So you're in that space. And so obviously I'm fascinated. I just got chills just thinking about it, because that is something to see and to live it's just, wow, you're seeing it. So please share with me what you're seeing, why that is. What's your thoughts?
We are, I'm glad you touched on HBCUs, because we are currently at this time making a more concerted effort to recruit minority students from those specific programs. We're looking at different universities across the U.S. and trying to form different articulation agreements so we can set up these pathways for these students to have more opportunity readily available to them. Mm-hmm. And at AUC, we have an eclectic mix of our student body. We have over 30 different student organizations, ranging from religious to cultural organizations. We have a Muslim student organization. We have a Jewish student organization. There's a Hispanic student, Latino Medical Student Association. Mm-hmm. There is literally something for every student to identify with. And I would say the demographic, as far as I'd say about 85 to 87% of our student body does come from the U.S.
Oh, U.S.
Yeah, from the U.S. Now, 85 to 87% that come from the U.S. It's a very diverse student body. Many of our first generation Americans. I have the privilege of interviewing students that have GPAs higher than a 3.5, 3.6 OBED, and their MCATs are above a 510, and they are left out of the U.S. medical school landscape equation. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Their stats are as competitive as their counterparts, but yet they're not getting the opportunity. They're not gaining entry into these programs. Just as you said, it's in the single digits. So that's where we come in, and where I am honored and privileged to be in a position to be an ambassador for our school. So I look at it as I'm creating awareness for a quality option for medical education. And really what it is a slightly different path with the same end goal. So be able to be in that position is priceless for me. Something that keeps me driving and moving on a daily basis.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, that's really great. So do you have any idea about your stats in terms of what is the representation of those of color, not just Black, but those, Indian, his Latino, is African American? I mean, do you have any idea about those numbers, or just of color as a whole?
So I can give you a general feel for that. On our website, we have all the demographics broken down, but interestingly enough, we could start with there's about 53% of our student body are now females. So where that used to be the majority were males, the 53% are females, 47% are males.
Yeah.
On that note, when you take a deeper dive into the demographics, I mean, there is, if you look at the whole pie chart, I would say probably a third or a little bit more are Caucasian. I would say about another third might be Indian or Southeast Asian descent, and the other third will be minority as far as African American and Latinos in there as well. I would say that's a fair representation of the split.
Okay. Wow. The third Caucasian.
Generally speaking.
That's definitely not the statistics in the AAMC for U.S. medical schools. A third. No.
That model is a little reversed at our program, and it gives me incredible joy to know that anyone can take advantage of the opportunity. I don't think that's the case at the U.S. medical school landscape, as the numbers you suggest.
Yeah. What are the misconceptions, would you say, about going to Caribbean schools?
It's important to know, Obed, that first and foremost, you're looking at about 50 international medical schools in the Caribbean. and 50, that's a lot of different options. And when you consider the fact that over 45 of these options don't have the proper medical board approvals, they don't have the clinical network of hospitals for third and fourth year, they don't have the outcomes that are more aligned with the US system. There are 3 or 4 programs out there that consistently pump physicians back into the workforce. So I'm very fortunate to work for one of those 3 or 4 institutions, and we're considering that a majority prey on students. I mean, let's face it, this is a for-profit arena, and there's a lot of schools that are not set up to get the students to where they need to be. So you have to, you really, when you're a student looking into these options, you really have to do your due diligence, and you have to make sure that the school is federally funded. U.S. federal financial aid is huge. I mean, who has the luxury of financing, a $250,000 education? Not too many people. So I think that's one way to kind of filter out the quality of the program, is the fact that, hey, the U.S. Department of Education recognized that, hey, the standards are comparable to that of a U.S.-based school. That's first and foremost. And then you want to look at, okay, the medical science curriculum. Is it on par with that of the medical schools that I have within my home state? So there's ways to really take a deep dive and verify and confirm all of this. Right on the AUC website, for example, there's a licensure and a link where you can go to each medical board in the U.S. and see that, okay, indeed, AUC's name is on that list, meaning that if I go through a 4-year medical education at their program, I'll have no issues coming back with that MD degree to apply for residency and licensure. So it's just really about doing your homework and speaking with alum and just seeing how the program is set up from top to bottom.
And should a prospective applicant should want to reach out to your alum, how does that happen?
Social media is a great way. I mean, they can add themselves to our Facebook page, to our IG page, Twitter. We have all the social media platforms. But as a student that submits an application to our program, we ask for that small commitment to formally put them in contact with an alum. Gotcha. So when they go into the student portal and they're submitting their application, they have access to different resources, and it's as easy as just saying, "Hey, I want to speak to an alum." You could, if you desire to speak to an alum in a specific specialty in your home state, we're going to try to match that up for you. So that way you can kind of pick their brains and speak with someone who is right where you were at one point.
Gotcha. Now, I appreciate your honesty with that. It'll help with the way in which you're thinking and going about this process. Wow. Is there anything else more you wanted to share?
Well, I mean, the main thing that I want to share is that, lots of times there is a certain voice in the U.S. landscape for pre-med students. There's so many people that get obstacles that get in your way of people that want to discourage you and tell you that this might not be for you. I cannot tell you the amount of applicants that I speak with during the interview that they say pre-med advisors, they've met with pre-med advisors early in their undergrad who have literally suggested that they pursue another career. Maybe you're not cut out to be a doctor. And that mentality, that perspective is very narrow in scope because they're exclusively referring to what they know, and that's the U.S. medical school landscape. When they're not, you have to be a little bit more open-minded and do your due diligence on other options. There might not be that many, but there are, and you can't close yourself off to those. And I think that the battle here is the pre-med student learning earlier on in the journey that these options do exist, and not finding out later on after they've been so discouraged and give up their hopes of pursuing medicine because they don't see any hope in the foreseeable future. So I think it's just creating awareness and letting the pre-med student know early on that, hey, ideally you want to get into a U.S. school, but if you don't, you still have these viable options to get you right where you need to be. I just want to defer to this one story. There's an alum that I know from Northern California who applied to different medical schools in California, and they said, okay, they sent them rejection letters, but very cordially, and said, hey, we know you're going to be a fine physician one day, but just not here at our medical school. So he was so passionate about medicine that he eventually landed at AUC. went through the 4-year program, and he landed a residency with the same program that had rejected him in his home state of in Northern California. And now he's in a position where he's teaching. He's literally the chief resident who is teaching their medical school's graduates. So, I mean, if that's not irony, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Good guy. And I respect and appreciate his diligence, you know?
Absolutely.
Tell me.
And he's one of my favorite alum. He comes to our events and he speaks in front of the crowd and he says, the first thing he says, Obed, is, listen, let's get the elephant out the room very quickly. If you sit here today and you tell me that AUC is your number one choice, he's like, you can leave the room right now, because that's not true. He's speaking to a room of students from the U.S. Ideally, who doesn't want to stay in their home state to pursue their medical education and be close to their family? But it just speaks to the student that wants it that bad, that they look at opportunities outside and realize the value in it and say, you know what? It's going to get me to where I need to be one day. I'm going to take a look at that. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sure, you know, there are a lot of pre-meds that are listening to you and looking at you and saying, wow, I want to know him. If they want to reach you, is there a way to do that? Yes,
absolutely. So they can reach me right through my email address through AUC. That would be JSierra, so JSIERRA @aucmed.edu. Feel free to reach out to me anytime via email. My direct number that's right on the AUC website as well is area code 305-767-8387. I have an Instagram page set up. Students can contact me in whatever way they feel most comfortable, anytime.
Awesome. All right.
There's one thing, you know, I love to help people that are passionate and want to help themselves. There's nothing that gives me greater joy than that. So please don't be shy in reaching out anytime.
Yeah, I think we're all feeling that. So thank you so much for being with us, Julio. All right, guys. So this ends this episode. We look forward to speaking to you again next time.